Sometimes the happiest day of a person's life becomes their last. On May 5, 2003, a 24-year-old bride went out for some fresh air a few minutes before the ceremony and disappeared without a trace. For 18 years, people searched everywhere for her, in rivers, forests, even the morgue. All this time, she was 8 meters underground, in an abandoned well right behind the temple where she was supposed to get married. In a snow-white wedding kimono, with a wilted bouquet in her hands, surrounded by darkness and silence. This is a story about how one wrong step can wipe a person out of life, and how the truth waited almost 2 decades to come to light. If you are fascinated by stories of unsolved mysteries and coincidences that change destinies, stay tuned until the end. And write in the comments, do you believe that there may be places in your city where someone has disappeared without a trace? And the answer is very close, but no one knows about it? Kyoto, Higashiyama District, Spring 2003. This ancient district is known for its temples, narrow streets, gardens with cherry blossoms, and an atmosphere that seems to transport you back centuries. Life here flows at a measured pace. Old people sweep the courtyards in front of traditional houses. Tourists take pictures of pagodas, and school children in uniforms hurry to class. Every stone here remembers stories. Every temple holds the prayers of generations. It was in this place, where the past and present are so closely intertwined, that an event took place that will remain a mystery for many years to come. Aoi Tanabe was an ordinary girl from a good family. 24 years old, she worked in an office at a small interior design company. Her colleagues described her as quiet, modest, and always polite. She loved to read, walk around the old neighborhoods of Kyoto, and photograph temples with an old film camera. She was not bright or loud, but rather inconspicuous. One of those people who blend into the crowd, but leave behind an impression of reliability and calm. Her parents, her mother worked as a nurse and her father worked at the post office, were proud of their daughter. She was their only child, their hope and joy. Aoi's fiancé was Kenji Moriyama. He was 27 years old and worked as an engineer for an electronics company. They met through mutual friends at a small party 3 years ago. Their relationship developed slowly, without drama or passion, just 2 quiet people who were comfortable with each other. He proposed in the winter of 2002 on the banks of the Kamo River, when light snow was falling. Aoi said yes almost immediately. Parents on both sides approved of the union. The wedding was set for May, when the cherry blossoms bloom and the weather is perfect for the ceremony. They chose a small Shinto shrine in Higashiyama. The place was quiet, not touristy, more local, known only to the residents of the area. The shrine stood on a small hill, surrounded by old trees and stone lanterns. The main building was constructed in the 18th century and has been restored several times, but it has retained its historical appearance. Behind the temple was a garden, not well kept and beautiful as in tourist places, but semi-abandoned, overgrown with bushes and bamboo. Few people went there. There were no paths or benches, only wild nature, which was slowly reclaiming space from civilization. May 5th, 2003 began clear and warm. The temperature was around 20 degrees, with a light breeze and clear skies. The ceremony was scheduled for 1 p.m. Aoi arrived at the temple early in the morning, around 9:30, with her mother and 2 friends, Yuki and Mizuki. They were there to help her get dressed, do her hair, and prepare everything she needed. The bride was calm, perhaps a little paler than usual, but without any signs of panic or fear. Her mother later said that her daughter looked pensive but happy. The preparations began in a special room at the temple, where brides usually changed before the ceremony. The room was small and traditional, with tatami mats on the floor, a low table, and sliding paper doors. Aoi put on a shiromuku, a traditional snow-white wedding kimono with long sleeves and a wide obi sash. The white color symbolized the bride's purity and readiness to start a new life, cleansed of the past. She wore a tsunokakshi on her head, a white headdress that hid her hair and, according to popular belief, tamed the bride's jealousy and pride. The process took over an hour. The kimono had to be put on in layers, with many ribbons and belts tied, and everything had to fit perfectly. At around 11 a.m., a photographer hired by the family took several pictures. In these photos, Aoi stands in full wedding attire, her hands folded in front of her, looking at the camera. Her face is calm, without a smile. According to tradition, the bride was not supposed to smile before the ceremony. Her friends stand nearby, helping to adjust the folds of the kimono. These photos would be the last images of Aoi alive. At 11:30, the bride suddenly said she needed to go out for some fresh air. Yuki, one of her friends, later recalled these words. She said she felt a little stiff in her kimono, that she was stuffy. She asked me to bring her some water. I went to the kitchen to get some water, and when I returned a few minutes later, she was no longer in the room. I thought she had gone out into the garden, as she had said. I didn't think anything of it. Aoi's mother was not alarmed either. The ceremony was to begin in an hour and a half, so there was plenty of time. She stayed in the room, checking the details of the decorations and talking to another friend. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Yuki went out to see where Aoi was. She looked around the garden in front of the temple, where visitors usually walked. No one was there. She returned to the room and asked if she had come back. No. They started looking for her. By 11:55, everyone in the temple was involved in the search. Her mother, friends, the temple attendant, the photographer. They searched all the rooms in the main building, checked the restrooms, looked in the storage rooms. Aoi was nowhere to be found. Someone suggested that she might have gone to the parking lot where the guests' cars were parked. They checked, but she wasn't there. Her parents' car was in its place, locked, with no one inside. At 12:30, the guests began to arrive. The groom, his parents, relatives from both sides, friends, about 40 people in total. Everyone gathered in the main hall of the temple, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Kenji, the groom, looked worried. He was taken aside and the situation was explained to him. He immediately rushed off to look for her. Together with several friends, he searched the entire temple grounds, shouting Aoi's name, looking behind every bush and rock. To no avail. At 1:15 p.m., when it became clear that the bride was not just late, but had actually disappeared, someone called the police. The first patrol arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers began questioning those present. When was Aoi last seen? What did she say? What was she wearing? Did anyone see her leave the temple? No one had. She was last seen by her friends in the changing room at 11:25. 5 minutes later, she disappeared. By 2 p.m., 10 police officers were already working at the scene. They organized a systematic search. They divided into groups and combed through the temple grounds, meter by meter. They checked buildings and sheds and looked into old rooms that had not been used for years. One of the officers found a door leading to the basement under the main building. He went down with a flashlight. It was empty, only dust, cobwebs, and old wooden boxes. No signs of human presence. They searched the parking lot, the road leading to the temple, and the nearby streets. They questioned residents of neighboring houses. No one had seen a girl in a white kimono. Such an outfit is impossible to miss. It is bright, voluminous, and attracts attention. But no one had seen her. It was as if Aoi had vanished into thin air. By the evening of May 5th, the search had expanded. Volunteers from the local community were enlisted, and about 50 people joined the police. They combed the forest around the temple, checked the paths, and went down to the stream that flowed a few hundred meters below the slope. One of the volunteers found a piece of white fabric on a tree branch. They handed it over to the police. It turned out to be part of a plastic bag, unrelated to the case. The search continued through the night. They used flashlights, spotlights, and a search dog. The dog picked up a scent from the room where Aoi had changed her clothes and led them to the exit of the building. Then the trail led to a side path leading to the garden behind the temple. But after a few dozen meters, the dog lost the trail. It stopped, circled around, whined, but could not go any further. The guide suggested that the trail might have been lost due to the large number of people who had walked through the area during the day. On May 6th, the next day, the search continued at dawn. They checked all the ponds and reservoirs within a 2-kilometer radius of the temple. Divers were used to search deeper areas. Nothing was found. One of the detectives suggested that Aoi might have been kidnapped. But how? There were always people in the temple, her mother, friends, servant. The time she was alone was no more than 5 to 7 minutes. During that time, someone would have had to approach her, force her to leave, or take her away, and do it in such a way that no one noticed. Unlikely. Another theory is that Aoi ran away. She was scared of the wedding, decided not to get married, and left on her own. Her bank account was checked. No withdrawals after May 5th. Her cell phone, the last call was in the morning of that day to her mother, briefly informing her that she was already at the temple. After that, the phone was not used and did not answer calls. It was later found in Aoi's bag, which was left in the dressing room. The phone was turned off. The family insisted that Aoi would never have run away. She loved her fiancé, was looking forward to the wedding, and was planning for the future. Her father said, "My daughter is not the type to run away from problems. If she had any doubts, she would have told us. We could always discuss everything openly." Her friends confirmed that Aoi seemed excited that morning, but it was normal pre-wedding nervousness, not panic or fear. Her fiancé, Kenji, was thoroughly investigated. He had a solid alibi. He arrived at the temple at 12:25 p.m., having been at home getting ready and then driving with his parents. Neighbors confirmed that they saw him leaving his house around 12 p.m. The distance from his home to the temple was about a 20-minute drive. Physically, he could not have been at the temple at the time of Aoi's disappearance. There was no motive for kidnapping or murder. The relationship was stable, without quarrels or conflicts. The parents of both sides approved of the marriage. There were no financial problems. All the guests who were supposed to attend the wedding were checked. A list was compiled, and everyone was questioned. Everyone had an alibi. No one was in the temple before the ceremony began, except for the closest relatives. The temple servants, an elderly priest and his assistant, were both in the main hall preparing for the ceremony and did not leave. The photographer finished shooting at around 11:05, then went outside to smoke, returned 10 minutes later, and did not see Aoi again. A week passed without any results. The media picked up the story. A bride who disappeared on her wedding day, a mystery in an ancient temple. Newspapers wrote articles, television showed reports. A photo of Aoi in a wedding kimono, taken on the morning of May 5th, spread throughout Japan. People called with information. Someone had seen a girl who looked like her in another city, someone on a train, someone in a store. All the leads were checked, but they all turned out to be false. Rumors began to spread. One of them was that Aoi was secretly pregnant and ashamed of it, so she ran away. Her medical records were checked. There were no signs of pregnancy. Another rumor was that she had been having an affair and her lover had taken her away. All her colleagues, friends, and acquaintances were questioned, but there was no evidence of an affair. Aoi led a quiet, predictable life, without secrets or drama. A month after her disappearance, the investigation reached a dead end. All possible locations had been searched. All theories had been checked. The detective in charge of the case, a 49-year-old veteran named Hiroshi Yamada, told the family, "We have done everything we can, but without new leads, we cannot continue the active search. The case remains open, and if any information comes to light, we will resume our work immediately." The family was devastated. But what else could they do? Aoi's parents did not lose hope. Every week, her mother would come to the temple, stand in the place where her daughter was last seen, and pray. Her father printed flyers with Aoi's photo and a description of the circumstances of her disappearance and posted them all over Kyoto. Her fiancé, Kenji, was unable to work for the first few months. He took vacation time, then went on unpaid leave. His friends said he had lost weight, hardly ate, and blamed himself. Although he was not at fault, he wasn't even there when it happened. Years passed. The Aoi Tanabe case became one of those cold cases that lie in the police archives, rarely reviewed, almost forgotten. Detective Yamada retired in 2010, and the case was transferred to another officer. He reviewed the materials, but found nothing new. The family continued to wait. Every year on May 5th, her parents would come to the temple and place flowers where their daughter had left. Kenji also came for the first few years, then less often. Life took its toll. In 2012, 9 years after Aoi's disappearance, Kenji met another woman. They started dating. He resisted the idea of a new relationship for a long time, feeling that it was a betrayal. But his friends and family convinced him that he couldn't wait forever. Aoi was either dead or had started a new life somewhere far away. In any case, he needed to move on. In 2014, he got married. He moved to another part of Kyoto. He had children. But he kept the engagement ring that was supposed to go to Aoi in a box in his closet. He couldn't throw it away. He couldn't forget. Aoi's parents never came to terms with it. Her mother died of cancer in 2017. Before she died, she said to her father, "I never found out what happened to our girl. Promise me you won't stop looking." Her father promised. He continued to visit the temple and hold out hope. He was already over 70 and his health was failing, but he did not give up. In 2020, it was decided to restore the temple in Higashiyama. The buildings were falling into disrepair, the roof was leaking, and the wooden structures were rotting. A major renovation was needed. The project was approved and a budget was allocated. The construction company began work in the spring of 2021. The plan included not only the restoration of the main buildings, but also the improvement of the surrounding area, including the abandoned garden behind the temple. On April 23, 2021, a team of builders was working at the back of the temple, clearing away thickets of shrubs and bamboo. One of the workers, a young man of 28 named Takeshi, noticed something strange under a layer of leaves and branches. He looked closer and saw old boards, darkened by time, partially rotten and covered with moss. He removed the branches and saw that the boards were lying on the ground, as if covering something. He called the foreman. The foreman came over and examined it. He realized that there was a pit or a shaft under the boards. He assumed that it was an old well, abandoned long ago. We decided to check it out. We carefully removed the boards. They gave way easily, having rotted away almost completely. Under the boards, we found a round hole about 1 meter in diameter. It was dark inside. Takeshi took a flashlight and shone it down. The beam of light pierced the darkness. The well was deep, its walls made of old stone covered with moss. The bottom was not immediately visible. Takeshi shone the light further, slowly lowering the beam down. At a depth of about 8 meters, the beam hit something white, some kind of fabric. Takeshi did not immediately understand what it was. He thought someone had thrown away a bag of trash. But the shape was strange, not like a bag, more like... He froze. He looked closer. Between the folds of white fabric, you could see something dark and round. A skull. A human skull. Takeshi jumped back from the edge of the well and dropped his flashlight. He shouted to the foreman, "There's a corpse! Someone's corpse is there!" The foreman immediately called the police. Work was stopped, and all the workers were taken away from the site of the discovery. The police arrived 30 minutes later. They were accompanied by a medical examiner and technicians. They cordoned off the area and began their investigation. They lowered a camera on a cable into the well and took pictures. The images confirmed that at the bottom of the well was a human skeleton dressed in white fabric, resembling a kimono. There were some objects next to the body, but it was difficult to make out what they were. Rescue workers with special equipment were called in. By evening, 2 rescue workers had descended into the well on ropes. They worked carefully, recording everything on video and in photos. The skeleton lay at the bottom of the well, partially covered with earth and leaves that had accumulated over the years. The white fabric was indeed a kimono, decayed and darkened by moisture, but still recognizable. Next to the body were the remains of a bouquet, long since turned to dust. There were also several pieces of jewelry, hairpins and a small comb, and an obi belt, still partially intact. The body was carefully lifted to the surface. The medical examiner conducted an initial examination on site. She concluded that the skeleton was female, aged approximately 20 to 25 at the time of death, to be determined more precisely in the laboratory. There were visible signs of a fracture of the left femur, most likely caused by a fall. Other injuries were unclear and required detailed examination. The time of death was very long ago, at least 15 to 20 years ago, judging by the degree of decomposition and the condition of the bones. News of the discovery spread quickly. The temple priest, who had been serving there since the 1990s, heard the description: a white wedding kimono, jewelry, a bouquet. It suddenly dawned on him. He remembered a story from 18 years ago. A bride who disappeared on her wedding day. He was not yet the chief priest at the time, but he remembered the commotion, the police, the search. He immediately called the police and reported the possible connection. The detectives dug up the old case of Aoi Tanabe. They compared the description of her clothes. It matched: a white shiromuku, hair ornaments, a bouquet of white flowers. The location where she was found, an abandoned garden behind the temple, exactly where the search dog had lost her trail 18 years ago. Everything fit. But confirmation was needed. They contacted Aoi's father. He was already 78 years old, barely able to move, living alone in the same house where he had raised his daughter. When they told him that they might have found Aoi, he didn't believe it. Too many years had passed. Too many false hopes had been raised. But he agreed to a DNA test. They took a sample of his saliva and compared it to the DNA from the skeleton's bones. The results came back a week later. A match. 99.8% probability of kinship. The skeleton belonged to Aoi Tanabe. The girl who disappeared on May 5, 2003, had been 8 meters underground all this time, in a well so close to the place where she was last seen that search parties simply couldn't imagine she was there. A detailed examination revealed the following. Aoi fell into the well, most likely by accident. The well was old, had not been used for decades, and had been abandoned before World War II. The boards that covered it had been installed by someone long ago for safety, but over the years, they had rotted and become brittle. Overgrown bushes and grass completely hid the well. It was impossible to see it until the area was cleared. Aoi left the temple and went into the garden. She probably wanted to be alone, to think, to calm down before the ceremony. She walked among the trees, lost in thought. She didn't notice the boards under her feet, hidden by the grass. She stepped on them. The boards couldn't support her weight, plus the weight of her heavy kimono. They broke. She fell 8 meters. She hit the stone walls in the bottom. She broke her leg. The femur was fractured in the middle. She may have had other injuries, ribs, internal organs, but the soft tissues were not preserved, so it is impossible to determine for sure. She was alive after the fall. The medical examiner found scratches on the stone walls of the well, about 1.5 meters from the bottom. Fingernail marks. Someone had tried to cling on, to climb, but with a broken leg, it is impossible to climb slippery stone walls. She screamed, called for help, but no one heard her. The temple was 150 meters from the well, with a thick forest between them, and the building's walls were thick. Inside the temple, preparations for the ceremony were underway. People were talking and moving around. Someone turned on the music. The sounds drowned out the cries from the well. Even if someone heard something remotely resembling a call, they could have mistaken it for a bird's cry or the sound of the wind. Aoi died at the bottom of the well. The exact time of death cannot be determined, but the examination suggests that death occurred within a few hours, from shock, blood loss, and hypothermia. The temperature in the well at a depth of 8 meters is low even in May, around 10 to 12 degrees Celsius. Without movement, with injuries, in a kimono wet from moisture, hypothermia set in quickly. By the evening of May 5th, Aoi was no longer alive. The body remained at the bottom. No one knew where it was. The search took place around the area. Buildings, roads, forests, and reservoirs were checked. But no one thought to check the ground beneath their feet. The well was so well hidden, so long abandoned, that even the temple servants did not remember its existence. An old priest who served there in 2003 said, "I didn't even know there was a well there. In all the years I've worked at the temple, no one has ever gone to that part of the garden. It was always overgrown, wild nature. We didn't take care of that place." Nature camouflaged the fall site so well that when a search party passed by in 2003, they simply did not notice anything suspicious. The dog lost the trail in that area, but they thought it was because of the large number of people. In fact, the trail ended right there because Aoi physically stopped walking. She had fallen down. For 18 years, the body remained there, slowly decomposing in the darkness and dampness of the well. The soft tissues disappeared, leaving only bones and remnants of clothing. The kimono, made of natural silk, had decayed almost completely, but its structure remained intact. The bouquet had turned to dust, but its shape was still discernible. The decorations, made of metal and wood, had fared better. When Aoi's father learned the truth, he didn't know whether to rejoice or cry. On the one hand, he finally had an answer. At last he knew what had happened to his daughter. She hadn't run away. She hadn't been kidnapped. She hadn't suffered for years somewhere in captivity. She had simply been involved in a terrible accident, and death had come relatively quickly. On the other hand, she had been so close all this time, only 150 meters from the place where he prayed every year. Right under the ground he had walked over thousands of times. If only, back in 2003, the search had been a little more thorough. If only someone had remembered the well. If only. Kenji, Aoi's former fiancé, was already married for the second time by then and had 2 children, a 10-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl. He lived in another neighborhood and worked for the same company, but in a higher position. When the police called him and told him that they had found Aoi, he was numb at first. He couldn't speak for a few seconds. Then he asked, Did she suffer?" They answered honestly, "We can't say for sure, but we assume that death occurred within a few hours." She wasn't alive in the well for years, if that's what you're asking. He came to identify her belongings. They showed him her jewelry, the remains of her kimono, her comb. He recognized everything. He remembered how they had chosen these jewelry together, how Aoi had tried them on, smiled, and said she would be the most beautiful bride. He couldn't hold back his tears. He only said, "I kept her ring all these years. I thought that if she ever came back, but she won't come back." The funeral took place in early May 2021, almost exactly 18 years after her disappearance. The remains were cremated, as is customary in Japan. The urn with the ashes was buried in the family plot of the cemetery next to Aoi's mother, who had died 4 years earlier. Her father ordered a monument, a simple stone with his daughter's name and dates of birth and death. The phrase, "You were always there, but we didn't know," was engraved on the stone. The temple where everything happened completed its restoration in the fall of 2021. The well was completely filled in, covered with concrete, and a memorial stone was placed on top with the inscription, "In memory of Aoi Tanabe, who left here on May 5th, 2003, and was found here on April 23rd, 2021. May her soul rest in peace." The site was fenced off with a low hedge and flowers were planted. Now it is a quiet corner of the garden where people sometimes stop, read the inscription, and lay flowers. The story received widespread media coverage. Newspapers wrote about the tragedy, about the accident that cost a young girl her life on the happiest day of her life. They discussed how this could have happened, why the search in 2003 did not find the well. Some criticized the police, saying that the search was not thorough enough. Others defended them, saying that the well was so well hidden that even the temple servants did not know about it. So how could it have been found? Detective Yamada, who led the investigation in 2003 and had long since retired, gave an interview. He was 72 years old and lived in the suburbs of Kyoto. He said, "I remember this case as if it were yesterday. We searched everywhere. We used everything that was available at the time. But the well, I couldn't even imagine that there could be a well there. If I had known, I would have checked it out. But no one knew. It's a terrible tragedy, an accident that could not have been predicted." Aoi's family received some compensation from the temple, a symbolic amount as an expression of condolences. The temple also pledged to maintain a memorial and hold an annual memorial service on the anniversary of Aoi's death. Her father accepted the compensation, but the money was meaningless. He told reporters, "I just wanted to know the truth, and now I know. My daughter didn't suffer for years. She passed away quickly. That's my only consolation." Kenji continued to live his life. His current wife knew about Aoi, that she was his first fiancée. She was understanding and did not feel jealous of his past. After the funeral, Kenji took Aoi's engagement ring to the cemetery and placed it on her grave. He said, "Now it's where it should be, with her." This story became a reminder of the fragility of life, of how one wrong step can change everything. Aoi was minutes away from the happiest moment of her life. The ceremony was set to begin at 1 p.m. She was supposed to walk down the aisle, exchange vows, and start a new life. Instead, she took a few steps in the wrong direction and disappeared. It wasn't someone's evil will, nor was it a crime, just a terrible, tragic accident. Some wondered if she hadn't gone out for some fresh air, if her friend had gone with her, if the temple had taken care of the whole garden and not just the front part, if the well had been filled in decades ago, as it should have been. So many what-ifs. But history knows no subjunctive mood. What happened, happened. Father Aoi died a year after his daughter's funeral in 2022. He was 79. They say that after he learned the truth, he found peace. There was no more agonizing uncertainty, no more endless questions without answers. He knew where his daughter was. He knew what had happened to her. And that allowed him to let go. He was buried next to his wife and daughter, 3 graves in a row in a quiet cemetery on the outskirts of Kyoto. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Are there places in your city where similar tragedies have occurred? Do you know stories of people who disappeared under mysterious circumstances and the truth only came out years later? Let's discuss how such accidents can be prevented. What can be done to prevent them from happening again? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories about real crimes and tragedies that changed people's lives.